and welcome to the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of June 13th, 2025. A large number of events have taken place, so let's get started. And today we'll talk not only about Ukraine, we will of course also discuss the situation in Iran. Today, Israel has launched its own special operation targeting nuclear facilities. At least in the morning, it was clearly a special operation against Iran's nuclear sites. But by the end of June 13, 2025, we can already see that Israel is going beyond the framework of this operation to destroy nuclear facilities. This is primarily due to the fact that Iran's air defense is not just ineffective, it is virtually non-existent. It simply does not exist. Israel is striking at will, using any type of weaponry available. Saboteurs are operating throughout Iran, and this may lead to completely unpredictable consequences for the country. But let's go in order and return to Ukraine. First, there was another exchange of bodies today. According to available information, the Russian Federation returned 1,200 bodies to Ukrainian territory. Ukraine, in turn, returned absolutely nothing to the Russian Federation. Once again, interesting footage has emerged from the Chernahib region, showing objective control. In this video, we can observe how, during reconnaissance operations, the Russian side identified yet another position, presumably belonging to Ukrainian units responsible for drones and possibly air defense. The footage shows what appears to be a combined strike that destroyed the AFU position. It seems like just another video, and yes, there may be some interesting nuances or details visible, but the key takeaway is that since June 2025, the Russian Federation has been particularly active on the Sumy-Chernahib section of the front. Increasingly, footage of this kind is appearing. Targeted strikes against large gatherings of Ukrainian drone operators, likely involved in launching drones into Russian territory. There may also be strikes on electronic warfare equipment deployed there to counter Russian drones. Looking at the overall map of Ukraine and the development of combat operations since June 1, 2025, such footage is coming exclusively from the northeastern part of the country, namely Chernahib and Sumy regions. We are not seeing this kind of activity on other parts of the front. Now let's move on to the Sumy front. Offensive operations are underway here, and over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has significantly improved its positions. The key event of the day is the final clearing of the village of Nvka. This information was confirmed today, primarily by the Russian Ministry of Defense, but the Northern Forces Group was the first to report the advancement of Russian units. Based on reports from the Ministry of Defense and the Northern Forces Group, we made a slight adjustment, specifically marking the forest belt slightly west of Nvka. We did not mark the village itself, as several days ago there was already objective control footage showing Russian soldiers present. So it was only a matter of time before the Ministry of Defense confirmed this. In essence, fighting along the central axis is drawing to a close. Let me remind you, two villages remain in this sector, Nova Mykolaievka and Vorochina. So far, there is no news confirming the advance of Russian forces toward these two locations. However, more and more experts believe that within the next 24 to 48 hours, both settlements will come under the control of the Russian Federation. At that point, we will be able to confidently say that the central axis of the offensive toward the city of Sumy is complete. Only the village of Yunakivka will remain, where Ukrainian forces are still holding the line and preventing Russian troops from advancing deeper into the Sumy region. Now let's move to the Kupansk sector. Something very interesting is unfolding here. For the second day in a row, there are reports of Russian units advancing west and northwest from the village of Dvorishna. Yesterday, this information came from the pro-Ukrainian deep state mapping team. The pro-Ukrainian mappers made a significant adjustment in this area. Note how much territory was simultaneously marked as taken by Russian forces. Today, Deep State's map updates are being supplemented by other experts who are filling in individual squares and forest belts. It is possible that the Russian army continues its offensive here, with the likely goal of straightening the front line between the villages of Doroshivka, Kutkivka, Nvka and onward toward Fiholivka. Active Russian offensives may currently be taking place in this area, slightly to the south, near the village of Rydkodub. After a short operational pause, the Russian army has resumed offensive actions. Airstrikes and bombing raids are currently being conducted against Ukrainian positions near the village of Karpivka. Ukrainian strongholds, trenches and dugouts are being leveled, while Russian units advance under the cover of FPV drones. This area has seen a high concentration of FPV drone strikes and numerous geolocated videos. For the past 3 to 4 days, we received virtually no updates from this sector, but today a large number of geolocated videos appeared all at once. This clearly indicates a resumption of active combat. As we previously assumed, the offensive has resumed from Rydkadub in a southern direction toward the town of Lyman. Next, we move to the Siversk sector of the front. This area has been active lately. A few days ago, some pro-Western OSINT experts reported a possible Russian offensive toward the village of Cerebrianka. According to some mappers, Russian forces managed to enter the southeastern outskirts of the village during that offensive. However, over the past few days, we have received no confirmation of that advance, although that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. It's possible Ukrainian units repelled the Russian attack, or that the true target of the offensive wasn't Cerebrianka itself, but the nearby village of Chryhorivka. Today, the most interesting updates come from this small village, which has essentially been wiped off the map since 2022. Fighting has taken place in this area since that year. In the latest footage, we can see Russian soldiers raising the Russian flag. This takes place on the western edge of Chryhorivka. Based on this footage, a partial marking was made in the western and central parts of the village. Possibly in the near future, the area will be completely marked as controlled, and we may start receiving the first geolocations from the southeastern part of Cerebrianka. The Russian army is advancing along the Siversky Donets River. It's clear that the situation is becoming increasingly difficult for Ukrainian units still stationed in the Kremina forests. It is highly likely that, in the near future, they will attempt a withdrawal to the west or southwest, to remain closer to settlements such as Nvka, Cerebrianka and Yampil, and to stay near evacuation routes. Because in the Cerebriansky forestry area, a new encirclement of Ukrainian forces could soon take shape. Next, we move on to the Constantinovka direction. Today, several interesting updates have come in from the town of Chasiv Yar. Some pro-Russian cartographers have made corresponding adjustments, according to which the armed forces of the Russian Federation have almost completely cleared the southern part of Chasiv Yar. First and foremost, we're talking about the workshop number 2-inch neighborhood. There's also information about advances into the Shevchenko district. So in fact, as of the morning of June 13, 2025, for example, the Russian armed forces were reportedly controlling about 80% of the town, give or take. But by the end of the day, on June 13th, Russian units had, according to pro-Russian cartographers, expanded their control to approximately 85%. We're waiting for geolocations, but I remind you that there's a significant gap between the geolocated Russian-held positions and those in the grey zone. There's a large pocket, and I also remind you that since the start of fighting in Chasiv Yar, we have never received a single geolocation confirming Russian control in the area from the Novi district toward Shevchenko and workshop number 2. We're waiting for geolocations that would allow us to make final adjustments. Next, we move south of Constantinovka. The Russian army continues its offensive here. Russian units are steadily improving their positions along the Siversky Donets-Donbass Canal. According to some pro-Russian cartographers, several more tree lines have come under Russian control. Ukrainian formations are gradually withdrawing from this section of the front, which will soon allow Russian forces to fully control the entire canal stretch from Nvka to Chasiv Yar. This, in turn, will improve Russia's logistical capabilities, allowing Russian units to accumulate more rapidly on the Ukrainian side of the canal, shortening the time needed to prepare for a major battle for Constantinovka. In the area of the Clayban bike pocket, fighting continues. What Ukrainian forces most likely feared and tried to avoid has apparently happened. The Russian army has effectively established full fire control over the T-0524 highway. As you can see, a significant number of geolocations have been published from this area in the last 24 hours, and since early June, this stretch has seen a growing stream of such geolocated evidence. The Russian Federation fully controls this direction. Ukrainian forces have lost the ability to supply their garrison in the villages of Clayban, Nvka, and Cerebrianka without obstruction. It seems the Russian side will continue to tighten the noose around this pocket, and within the next few weeks, the Ukrainian armed forces in this area could find themselves in full encirclement with no evacuation options. This isn't just a matter of encirclement. You must understand the terrain. Just north of Ukrainian positions is the Clayban reservoir, which serves as a major element in the semi-encirclement. With just a few kilometers between the eastern and western flanks, the situation could change drastically. Next, we move toward the Pokrovsk agglomeration. The most important updates today come from the settlement of Koptyevo. I remind you that a few days ago, some cartographers marked Koptyevo as being under the control of the Russian armed forces. For example, this is how the map looked yesterday, as of the evening of June 12, 2025. Some sources and platforms were already referring to Koptyevo as contested territory or territory with a Russian military presence. Today, all the fog of war over this situation was cleared by the Russian Ministry of Defense, which officially reported that, as a result of combat operations, Koptyevo has come under full control of the Russian armed forces. Based on this report, we've made the appropriate map update. Still, it's important to point out that no objective control footage from within the village has been released so far. Nevertheless, we'll wait for this footage. It's likely that the front line is extremely close to the village. Perhaps Russian units haven't yet had the opportunity to film a flag-raising video due to the large number of drones overhead. But as Ukrainian forces are pushed farther back, the chances of such a video appearing will increase. In any case, we're already seeing the formation of a more clearly defined semi-encirclement of Novo-Ekonomikny. The Russian army will likely continue its advance, and the next targets appear to be villages like Novotoretsk and Boykovka. Gaining control over these villages would give Russia the ability to declare a semi-encirclement of Novo-Ekonomikny and possibly even begin operational encirclement of Pokrovsk itself. In this configuration, the Russian army would fully control all supply routes, not necessarily 100%, but enough that Ukrainian losses during resupply efforts would approach 60 to 70% or more. Given the success of Russian units on the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, it's reasonable to expect renewed offensive actions by the Russian armed forces toward the town of Cerebrianka. Control over Cerebrianka would effectively mean full control over the Pokrovsk area and could even signal the beginning of a Ukrainian withdrawal and the potential surrender of the city. Now we move on to the southern Donetsk, Novopavlivka, or even Dnipropetrovsk directions. These three sectors have started to blend together. Russian forces are actively advancing at the junctions between them. The most significant update today comes from the village of Komar. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense and affiliated sources have released both reports and video footage from the area. The ministry has confirmed that Komar has been fully cleared of enemy presence. In addition, Russian troops published visual confirmation, footage of Russian flags being raised in various parts of the village. Komar was captured very quickly. I remind you that battles for places like Bohatyr, Alexivka, Otradne, Rozliv and Constantinople lasted for months. In contrast, Bohatyr was abandoned by Ukrainian forces in just a week or two of fighting. This indicates an accelerated pace of Russian offensives. The Russian army may now push further northwest, though it remains difficult to assess the current defensive capabilities of the Ukrainian forces in the area. In the Alexivka Zeleny Kut sector, corresponding map updates have been made. Some pro-Russian analysts have already marked full control in the Zeleny Kut area. Ukrainian forces are trying to evacuate personnel, wounded soldiers, vehicles and ammunition from the fields. This could be another location where an encirclement may form soon. As we discussed in previous videos, full fire control has already been established over this narrow corridor, including 24/7 FPV drone coverage. At this point, withdrawing Ukrainian troops from here is extremely difficult, if not impossible, without suffering major losses. Since early June, we've been receiving a large number of geolocated videos confirming that virtually every square kilometer of this area is under full Russian FPV drone control. The noose is tightening around this direction as Russian forces continue their offensive. Today, footage was released from an area said to be the village of Horokov. Although we couldn't geolocate the footage precisely, it shows Russian soldiers raising the Russian flag after clearing the village. The author of the video insists it was filmed in Horokov. You can see that over the past 24 hours, Russian forces have made significant progress. First in Koptyevo, the eastern approach to Pokrovsk, and then in Komar, where we also got objective control footage. Russian troops are pushing further northwest towards settlements like Zaporizhzhia, Yalta and Zarya. Soon we may receive new geolocations and map updates from this area. On the Zaporizhzhia front, the Russian army has established a foothold in the village of Nvka. For several days now, we've discussed the situation around this small village. There were map adjustments from both neutral and pro-Ukrainian sources. For a long time, they showed the southeastern part of Nvka under Ukrainian control. But today we've seen the first updates, especially on pro-Ukrainian platforms, indicating that the Russian army has taken control of a farm in the southern and eastern parts of Nvka. Judging by the nature of these updates, it appears that Russian forces have gained a foothold and will soon attempt to fully clear the village. After clearing Nvka, Russian troops will likely move immediately toward Poltavka. After Poltavka, they'll have access to open terrain, operational freedom of maneuver. As for the frontline situation and general developments in Ukraine, that seems to be all for now. It's also worth noting that today Ukraine officially withdrew from the negotiation process. President Zelensky and the foreign minister stated that they see no point in continuing negotiations, as they haven't led to any results or even a temporary ceasefire. And that's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and all the best to you.